Kum Len and Ablat Gemara. We are up to Masechta Sukah Daf Mem Daled Amud Aleph. The Gemara is discussing over here the first day of Sukkot. We will bench lulav wherever you are, regardless. Only in the times of the Beis Hamikdash but after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, because of Chutz La'aretz, they don't bench the first day because we're not Baki B'Kriya de Yarch. We're not sure exactly what day the month is or what day Yom Tov is. So therefore, it's a role to align themselves with us. They don't do it as well. In fact, it's written in the Sfarim. One of the reasons why Shmini Atzeres, those communities like Lubavitch, have hakafas is to align themselves with Israel, who do have a kafas on Shmini Atzeres by night. So this idea of aligning, and in Eretz Yisrael now in the last few years, they have hakafas mitzvah Simchas Torah after Simchas Torah is over to align themselves with Chutz La'aretz, who have their main hakafas then. So this idea of alignment. And then we start talking about Arava, that Arava also we do, since in the Beis Hamikdash we did it for 7 days, so we do it for 1 day, and we decide to do it on Shabbos, on the 7th day, even if it falls out on Shabbos. Then we had an argument, what exactly did they do by the Arava? Was it the Tila, or was it Kifa? Zikifa means they just put it against the Mizbeach, and the Tila means that they took it, and the way Rashi learned is they circled the Mizbeach with the Arava. Now, it doesn't mean they did not circle the Mizbeach with the Lulav. They did that as well. Because otherwise, why are we circling the Mizbeach? Why are we circling our Bima every day with our Lulav if they never did that in the Beis Hamikdash? We're doing it because in line with what they did in the Beis Hamikdash, they circle with the Lulav, but they also circle it with the Arava. And Big Machlekes is showing you what exactly circle means. Some Rishonim want to say, I think it was that it's Gaius, he wants to say that circling doesn't mean they physically walked around the Mizbeach with the Lulav with the Arava in their hand. There was a circle around the Mizbeach, and each person was holding the Arava in the hand. So therefore, it's like they were circling the Mizbeach. They didn't actually move around. Others say no, they physically moved around the Mizbeach as well. We'll soon see why we have to say those who say they stood in one place. What they did with the Arava, we'll talk about in a minute. So we're up to the Gemara over here. I think we're up to over here. Amalei Baila Rav. Second line to the top of the page. Amalei Baila Rav. Why is it Lulav the Abdin Shiva? Today, Lulav, we do 7 consecutive days. Today, we do 7 days. The first day is Mahat Torah, but the other days are only with the Rabbanan to remember the Beis Hamikdash. Arava. Arava also was done 7 days in the Beis Hamikdash. We only do it 1 day, Hoshana Rabbah. How come we don't also have the concept of Arava every single day? Amalei. So first he tried to answer him, since we have an Arava inside the Lulav, so maybe we are Yotze with the Arava in the Lulav all the other days. Amalei Hoyel v'Adam Yotze deChavase ba'Arava shebeLulav. We have the Arava that's including the Lulav. Amalei Yahu Mishum Lulav the Kavadei. That Arava has nothing to do with remembering the Beis Hamikdash as Arava. That Arava is because there's a mitzvah called having Arava. If you tell me, no, you pick up the lulav twice. You pick up the lulav once, so therefore you have the mitzvah of Arava. And then you pick up the lulav the second time to have Arava on its own. How can that be? But isn't there every single day? We don't do that. Every single day, we don't do that at all. No, we don't see anybody picking up twice. I'll explain to you. Lulav, which is the rice, lulav today. Mahat we still have to do 1 day. So Avdin Shiva, you take that 1 day and we stretch it out to 7. Zeichel Amigdash. But Arava, when it comes to Arava, the Rabbanim, since Mahat outside the Beis Hamikdash, there's no concept of Arava. The only reason why we do Arava at all is to remember the Beis Hamikdash. So we don't need to remember it every day. We don't have to do it 7 days. 1 day is enough. Why Lulav is 7? Because anyway, outside the Beis Hamikdash, Mahat you have to do it 1 day. So therefore, it's easier once we're doing it to extend it. Says the Gemara, Leman, you're telling me that Arava today is only midrabanan to remember the Beis Hamikdash. Who are you following? Ilema la'abashol. If you're saying this follows abashol, didn't we learn previously Ha'amah who says Arvei Nachal? He says that Arvei Nachal, the pasuk Arvei in plural. Why is it plural? Shtayim achas lelulav, achas lemigdash. Because there are 2 separate mitzvahs. One mitzvah is for the Beis Hamikdash. And you're telling me that Arava is Rabbanan, but yet we have here that one Arava is part of the Lulav, and one Arava is part of the Mikdash. So we see that Arava is Mahat Torah, not just Midrabanan. So we understood you were saying here is that that the entire inyan of Arava is only Midrabanan, and therefore to remember it today, we don't really have to remember it. L'chayda in the Beis Hamikdash, Arava is Ma'atayda, Arvei Noch. So therefore, the question goes back: why don't we then do some activities every day to remember a mitzvah in the Torah? If it's Rabbanon, they hold that Malach Moshe Sinai. We said yesterday, that the following rules, with about 10 trees within an area of 50 amas by 50 amas, then we consider an entire area an area of trees, and therefore you're allowed to do things to it before 30 days before the Shemitah year. Arava, the idea of Arava, the base of Mikdash, when this Chamayim pouring the water every morning by the carbon atomic, all the Malach Sinai. So the way we understood is you're telling me that the answer was that Arava in the base of Mikdash is only with the Rabbanon, and therefore we don't have to make every single day something to remember it by. Hashanah Rabbis is sufficient. And Lulav, on the other hand, since it's Mahatayda in the base of Mikdash 7 days, and therefore we do a Zecher every day, Arava is also Mahatayda. You misunderstood, maybe misunderstood, or he's changing the answer. Lulav itself has a mitzvah outside the Beis Hamikdash. Lulav itself. So the previous answer was that Lulav in the Beis Hamikdash is Mahatayra, therefore we make a zeich every day. Arava in the Beis Hamikdash is with the Rabbanon, and therefore we don't, except for one day, Shana Rabbah. So Rabbi says no. Lulav outside the Beis Hamikdash at least has one day Mahatayra. So Avdin Leshiva zeich l'mikdash. So therefore we're just extending it zeich l'mikdash. But Arava, the less Ikim and Atayda Bigul, there is no Indian according to anybody to have an Arava outside the Beis Hamikdash Mahatayra at all. Therefore, we don't make it 7 days to remember the Beis Hamikdash. Kohenim, Baalei Mumim. A Kohen who is a Baal Mum is disqualified from doing any Avodah. We learned they used to sit there in the chambers, clean the wood out, had other inyanim to do, but they didn't have to, they were not allowed to walk, do any avodah, and they were not allowed to walk between the Mizbech and the Beis Hamikdash. That's section 11 Amma. They were not allowed to be there. So the Shlokish says, a Kohen, even though he's a Baal Mum, Nichnosin can enter Bein HaUlam Ulam Mizbech, can stand between the Beis Hamikdash, the Ulam, and the Mizbech, because this avodah he's permitted to do. Lots of Arava in order to do the mitzvah of Arava, even though normally not allowed to go, here they're allowed to go. So many are trying to learn that the whole Isser of a Baal Mum to be standing there is only Midrabanan, and therefore the mitzvah of Arava overrides that Isser the Rabbanan. And Taisa says, therefore, the other Isser of a Kohen, a Puri Reish, here he grows wild, he shouldn't be standing there. It's, again, only Asam the Rabbanan, therefore they can. Big Machlek is a Shreinim, according to the Shlakish. What about a Yisrael? A Yisrael not being there, that's also perhaps only an Isser the Rabbanan, and therefore maybe Yisrael also can stand there. And in fact, we know that sometimes Yisraelim, says Yisraelim pushed away over there, they're allowed to. Others learn that a Zor is not allowed to, that even though the Baal Mum is Midrabanan, but the Ritva seems to say in others that a Zor, a Yisrael standing there, is Asr Mahatayra. And therefore, a Yisrael can never go there even for the mitzvah of Arab. Others learn that even a Baal Mum is not, a Baal Mum is Mahatayra, not allowed to be there. In fact, the Rambam says so. So according to the Rambam, how do you understand Pshat and Shlokish? So what do you mean by Rabbi can be there? So there's two ways of understanding. Either when we say that he's not allowed to be there is only to do an avodah, but because he's not shaykh to the avodah, then it's asam ha'torah. But if he's not doing anything, it's not asam ha'torah. And over here, he's not doing an avodah that he's disqualified from. So therefore, he's allowed to. And others say the mitzvahs asay of Arava pushes away the loises of a Baal Mum being there and doing avodah. Rebbe said back to the Shloki, Mi Amre, who told you? Who told you? So Mora says, right now the Mora thinks that who told you that it's a chayiv to do, right now the Mora thinks, who says it's a chayiv to do Arava? You tell me it's a mitzvah to do Arava, and we have a special dispensation even of Kohen Baal Mum. Who told you? So he must say, but you yourself said, I'm going to ask your name. Because as the tears Arava, and the city of Cherason, as the tears Arava, the Nitzach Hamayim, Halach Moshe Messina. You Rabbi Yechon said that Arava is a mitzvah. What do you mean? Who told you? Elami Amred ben Tila. Who told you that they take it? in their hand, and therefore they have to go around the mizbeach, and that's why the kohen, whichever kohen take it, have to also walk through the area between the Beis Hamikdash and the mizbeach. Dilma b'skifa. Maybe all they do is they're putting it against the mizbeach, and therefore there's no need for a. So one kohen can do the whole activity. You don't need 100 kohen to stand on the mizbeach. You can have one kohen walking around just placing these aravas against the mizbeach. So therefore, there's no excuse for a kohen balmum to go there. Since you only need a couple of kohenim or even just one, who said your balmum were allowed? It might be learned. One of them says Chad Omar. So we have in Machlek. One of them says that Arava is Yisod Nevim. One of them says that this idea of Arava outside the Beis Hamikdash is a Yisod, that was a foundation that was put together by the Nevi'im. They instituted that we need to do this. That was Chagez Chayim Malachi. And Chad Omar, one of them says Minig Nevim, and one of them says merely a Minig. It was only a Minig. Then what? What do you mean by minig? Machlek is Rashi and other Rishonim what minig means. Rashi meaning means that the Nevi'im told the people do this, so we were still instructed by Chagis Chaim Malachi, to go ahead and to take the Arava, but they didn't say you have to. They said it's a nice thing to do. That's one way of learning. And the Ritva and other Rishonim learned that minig means that the Nevi'im themselves did not do it at all. The Nevi'im themselves did it for themselves. They never told anyone to do it. They themselves, meaning the Nevi'im, took it upon themselves, and the people saw they liked it, so they emulated the Nevi'im and they copied along. And Ma'anav Kamina we'll see later. We'll talk about soon. Let's conclude. Good conclusion. Very odd Gemara, because this time usually means we bring some kind of a proof, which is not so conclusive, but it sounds like. Here, he clearly said that Arava Yisod Nevim. This time, we conclude that. What does that mean? He said it. He said it. So it's not a conclusion that from we have some compelling remark. This is it. Anyway, actually say that.
How do you reconcile? How do you reconcile if you say Yisod Nevim or you said before Halacha L'Moshe Sinai?
No. We're talking about outside of the Beis Hamikdash.
Okay.
For us. He said that, but he's like what? He said, and that he said that there's a whole. He's asking you a question. What are you telling me? That it's a Yisod Nevi'im when he said clearly it's Halacha L'Moshe Sinai. In other words, it's Mahatorah. He paused for a short time, thinking it through, and then he said, "Shachum v'chazrim v'yastum." So first he said they forgot it. No, but it was Allah Moshe Sinai. The Nevi'im then are talking about Arav in the Beis Hamikdash. They forgot it, and then they came along, and they brought it back. So that's one shot. Says the Gemara. Did Rabbi Yechon actually say, is it possible they said that they forgot? No, they went to Gola's bubble, they forgot, and therefore they had to when they came to the second Beis Hamikdash, they had to remind them. So that's the first problem. Talking about the Beis Hamikdash, they had to be reminded. Did Rabbi Yechon actually say that they forgot? And then the Levim had to remind them? Can't be, why not? So Rashi, the way Rashi was, Rabbi Yechon himself said, Dilchoin Amri, Dilchoinhu. So remember the end of Baba Kama, we had a whole story about an American of Kahana, that he killed somebody in Bubble, so he had to flee for his life. He ended up, and Rav warned him that he should keep his mouth quiet. He shouldn't say anything because he was extremely sharp, extremely learned, and he might insult Rabbi Yechon. So anyway, we learned the whole Gemara at the end of Baba Kama, the whole story, the fascinating story. And Rabbi Yechon got angry with him and killed him. They had to Mechaim him. Then Rabbi Yechon asked him all of his fakers, and Rabbi answered every suffix Rabbi Yechon had. So Rabbi Yechon made it a comment, where Rashi learns. Amri. First, I thought that the Torah is only in Eretz Yisrael. There's no better place to learn Torah than Eretz Yisrael, and we have it all. But then I realized after Rabbi came here that the real Talmid Chachamim are those in Chutz La'aretz, those in Bavel, and because Ashid Kana is way ahead of us. And even because they went to Bavel and all those years with Goz Yichanya, they established the yeshivas, and they still maintain that learning and so on. This is exactly the opposite of what Rabbi Yirmiyah used to say, but Shakim Shivani is Bavel, that they don't know how to learn, and all the Hani Bavloi Tipshoy, all those derogatory comments that he used to make. Rabbi Yirmiyah is exactly the opposite. Says the Gemara, so therefore, how is it possible that in Bavel they forgot such a din like a rava? How can they forgot it? Says the Gemara, like Kasha. Kan be Migdash, kan be Gvuli. You're mixing up. In the Beis Hamikdash, of course, there's halacha Moshe Sinai. But we're talking now about the rest of the world, and we do Hoshana Rabbah. Where does that come from? And that is a machlekes, whether it's a Seid Nevi'im or Minig Nevi'im. What's the nafkamina? Rashi says if it's a Seid Nevi'im or Minig Nevi'im, the nafkamina is whether you make a bracha. If it's a Seid Nevi'im, you have to make a bracha. But if it's merely a Minig, Rashi says, how can you say V'tzivanu? We were commanded. It's a Minig that we took upon ourselves. So therefore, we cannot say a bracha with tzivanu, which will come back to soon. Rabbi says, Arava requires a shir. It doesn't say what it is, we'll soon see. Then it tells us there's some kind of regulations regarding the size. Then it tells us, you should take the rava on its own. You don't tie hadassim or anything else with it, just purely the ravas. You're not yaitzi with the rava and the lulav, which seems to be redundant. Since the rava and the lulav is tied to the lulav and to the hadassim, you just said it has to be on its own. So what's the shaila? What do you have to tell me for? Next week said, I thought, if you only looked at lulav once, how could it be yaitzi with the rava, since the purpose of that rava is for the mitzvah of lulav? If you lift it again, maybe it's different. Kamash V'lan, it comes to tell you that's not so. Maybe that's not so. Now what? That what do you call it? That you are what do you call it? That you cannot use that. It has to be all on its own, and you cannot use the lulav for it. But however, disagrees. He said a person is yaitz with the lulav and the lulav, and most people are not going to be yom tov v'rishul chag. The kamash you said there's a size to the lulav. What's exactly the size? And the Gemara is not going to give us the size. They can just talk about some requirement, which is gimel bade alon. You need 6 stalks, moist stalks. You need 3 moist stalks with leaves. Rav Sheish that are moist. Even 1 leaf, and 1 stalk. So the Gemara wondered, it sounds like the Gemara seems to be saying that even if they're not together, just you have 1 leaf and you have 1 twig, and that's good enough. So the Gemara says, what do you think that even just 1 leaf and you're holding a leaf in your hand and you're holding a twig in your hand, and that's that rava? You have 1 twig, 1 branch with a moist leaf on it is all right. The Gemara doesn't give us a shear about the size, how long it should be. So technically, there is really no size for the arava. It can be as short as you want. But Rashi says that the custom is actually to have very long ones. Rashi says here that the arava that since the Gemara doesn't give us a shear, Rashi says the arava that they used to go around is kol husagi. It can be any size, doesn't matter. But Rashi concludes, Hashta Nogud, now the minig is Lahavi Murboyas Anofim Aruchim. We try to get longer aravas, the yafim, and nice ones. Sheminkel mitzvah ba'ayin yafim. Because a mitzvah is more evident when you take it something nice and make it look nice. Amar Eva said, I was standing before Rabbi Tzaddik. This Rab Tzaddik was this Rab Tzaddik who fasted there by the Churban Beis Hamikdash. So anyway, he said, I was thinking about Rab Tzaddik, but Isa who gave Arava Kamei, and this person brought an Arava for him. Shakil, he took it, and what did he do? And Chavit, he took it and he Chavit. Rashi says, what does Chavit mean? What do you do with Arava? Rashi says Chavit means he shook it. No, exactly what we do the lulu, we make the nuyim, that's what he did with Arava. The Rambam says Chavit means to bang it against the ground, and the Rambam writes, you take a Arava and you bang it 2 or 3 times against the ground. We bang it 5 times, but we follow the Rambam. That Rashi says that they used to actually do the nuyim with the Arava, just like we do it with a lulav. He didn't make a bracha. So clearly from the Gemara here, when there's a minig, if you hold as a minig, you don't make a bracha. How can you say vitzivan? But there's a big, look along places here, there's a big machlekes. Do you, for example, make a bracha on Halal, on Rosh Chodesh? But Halal Rosh Chodesh is only a minig, and it seems clearly the Gemara here, you don't make a bracha on a minig. So there are opinions that says certain minhagim you do, certain minhagim you don't. So some that say on any minig you don't make a bracha because it says v'tzivanu. And how can you make a bracha v'tzivanu on a minig? So therefore, the machlek is by Chanukah lights and shul whether you make a bracha or not. Chacham Tzvi and others, is because it's a minute to light candles and shul. How can you say v'tzivonu? That's one school of thought. What about Yom Tov Sheni Shagolis? We just learned before that we also know Gemara Beis says we're Bokib Kviyarcha, but meaning I was saying to be a Denu. So how can we make a bracha? How can we have a second day Yom Tov? It's only a minute. I make all these brachas, Kiddush, and everything else. So they answer that no, that on second day Yom Tov we don't say V'tzivanu Kiddush. Where's the Tzivanu and Kiddush? So there's no, and davening is no V'tzivanu. So therefore you can say the problem is not making the bracha. The problem is using the word V'tzivanu. You instructed us. And Rashi says, by a minute, there's no leisaso. You can't say v'tzivonu. What did Hashem tell us? So other Hashem just totally disagree, and they say, what are you talking about? Eating matzah the second night of Pesach, you clearly say, Asher kiddushanim v'tzivonu al achilas matzah, and it's only a minute. And because it's only a minute, how can you do that? So they want to argue there's different levels of minhagim, that some minhagim we do make a bracha, and some in Hagim we don't make a bracha. So when it comes to Arabas, because they say Ela tiltul ba'alma, the mitzvah is really just holding it in your hand. So therefore, because it's such a small mitzvah, therefore we don't make a bracha. But when it comes to other minhagim, which are much more involving, then you like saying the Yom Tov and maybe and Halal and others, then you do make a bracha. So it's very exciting is about minhagim whether you make a bracha or not, and it all has to do with over here. The Rambam clearly holds you don't make a bracha on a minig. And it has also to do with another machlekes, whether saying Hashem's name, let's say part of a bracha that you don't really have to say, is it an Issa D'Oraisa or is it only an Issa D'Rabbanan? According to some, it's Issa D'Oraisa, like Sisa Shem Hashem Akech L'Shav. The Rambam in Truba Kufhei clearns clearly that it's Mahatoida. You're not allowed to say the Abish's name if it's a vain. Taisis and Rosh Hashanah, the Chlam Yibah holds Mefedish, it's only D'Rabbanan. When is it also to say Hashem's name in vain? If you say it in vain, if it's part of the text of a bracha, even though you didn't have to say the bracha, what's wrong Mahatoida to thank the Abish for giving us a mitzvah lulav? Today I got all excited. We're going to have a mitzvah lulav, so I want to thank the Abish. What's the big deal? So Mahatoid is not about it. Since saying Hashem's name as part of a bracha is only Yisud Rabbanon, therefore we're much more relaxed and will allow you to make a bracha even when it comes to a minute. But the Rambam can't, because the Rambam holds saying the Abish's name when you don't have to is an Yisud Raisa. Therefore he's very careful or particular when you say the Abish's name in the bracha. Says about it further. Also, Lekamei came before him. Now, who got a person came before him. Amalei said, Karyasa Isli, I own a lot of cities, obviously the very rich man. Karmaya Isli, I own a number of vineyards. Zesaya Isli, I own a number of olive orchards. But also B'nai, it was the year of Shemitah. But also B'nai Kayasa, the people of the city went, people who live in my city, in my villages, went. They pruned all around and they dug all around my vineyards in Shemitah, and I pay them with olives from the olive tree. Did I do anything wrong? It's the year of Shemitah. Did I do the right thing or I didn't do the right thing? Interesting expression. Rashi says the word arich, it means the right thing or a good thing. And he brings a passage from Ezra that shows that arich means it's a good thing. Arich, he did the wrong thing. Why? Because you're paying the workers with the olives when the olives should be hefker. And you shouldn't have them. So therefore, because it says before, we learned the last few days, that Shemitah, you're allowed to eat all these things to eat, not to use it as a business, and you're paying them for their work. But it seems like the fact that they pruned all around the tree on Shemitah is not a problem. And the Gemara will ask why. He left. So he turned Rabbi Elazar ben Tzaddik. Said I was Avis, I was thanking for Rabbi Tzaddik. Rabbi Elazar ben Tzaddik turned around. He said, I lived here in this country here, Mem Shanin. I lived here in this country 40 years. I have never seen Bar Inish, a person who goes on the right path, is taken on the right path, Kedain, like this person here. No, you told him it's going to cost him now extra money because you paid them with olives. Now you tell him that the olives will have, you can't pay me, you have to pay him from your own pocket. Then he complained, didn't ask a second question. He took it on the chin and off he went. And then Nachman, he came back and said, what should I do? But the comment of Rabbi Elazar Tzaddik was even before that. He saw the guy was a very honest, wasn't a Talmud Chacham, but he followed every halach properly. He wanted to know what to do. He told him, this is what you do. Why don't you make your zeisim olives hefke for the poor people? That the Rishonim want to know why to the poor people. The holiday of Shemitah is to be hefke for everybody. Poor or rich. The holiday is hefke means I have no control. And here, So I guess maybe there was a drought or something, or there's a famine, and he was saying, meanwhile, do a mitzvah and give it to all the poor quickly. The 10 pretaya, and then take money out of your own pocket, the kashkushke krami, those people who are fixing up your vineyards. Why didn't he also tell me you're not allowed to you're not allowed to fix up the vineyard? With kashkushim mishore, you're allowed to go ahead and you're allowed to dig all around the vines to make it grow better. But time we learned by Hashviyas to Shamtera, it says in Plusik that on Shviyas Shemitah you should leave everything alone, but in Tashta, leave your land alone. Tishmaten, it says in the Bryce, Tishamtena milakashkesh, you should leave it alone. You shouldn't go ahead and till the soil around your trees. And don't remove all the stones and the pebbles that are obstructing the growth of the tree. So how can you should have told me not to do that either. There's two different kinds of digging around these vines. One of them is just to cover all the holes. The other one is to improve it's like sort of pruning it, improving the growth of the tree. To make the tree grow better, that's forbidden. But to seal up the holes, that you're allowed to. So therefore, that's what they were doing. Now that we're talking, Avoy was the father of Rav, who's saying things over the name of Rav Tzaddik. He says something else, which has nothing to do with Masechta Sukkah. It has to do with Masechta Shabbos. Again, it's amazing how the Gemara works. You would think that these halachas would be in Masechta Shabbos, and you would never find it in Masechta Shabbos. You'd only find it in Masechta Sukkah. Why would you think it's Masechta Sukkah? So he said here, a person should not walk Erev Shabbos. You shouldn't walk on Erev Shabbos more than Gimel Pasois. And why? Because who said you'll have where to eat on Shabbos? And the halacha is that you start counting the time it takes 3 parsois, which is 12 kilometers, which is equivalent of 3 times 72 minutes, or basically 4 hours and whatever it is, 3 times 72 minutes, which is 216 minutes, divided into hours. And that's for early morning, that's how much time you can go spend on the road. But it doesn't mean distance, because if you're on horses, you can go much further. It's a time. The base of his own house, he shouldn't do that because it'll spring himself upon the people that won't have enough time to prepare Shabbos, cause a lot of angst in the house. I will lose pizza, but if you're staying in a hotel and he's traveling, I might not get some. He's not relying on anybody. Surely he has his own food, so therefore you can come much later at Shabbos. We can have others say, and this is the halacha mekana loydus base. Even your own house, where in your own house, whatever you have, you're happy with, and nevertheless we say we don't want you to spring yourself upon them and so on. Surely, if you're going to a hotel somewhere else, you shouldn't do it. Interesting, Shulchan says today you're talking about 300 years ago, or 250 years ago, today, in my time, he says everybody generally prepares extra food on Shabbos, and there's always spare food for guests. So therefore, today you're allowed to come later on Erev Shabbos, even if you don't communicate that your arrival, you're coming, because there's always leftover food, there's always extra food, and therefore there's no angst. In fact, people enjoy having guests on Shabbos. That's what Shulchan says, which is interesting. And especially today, all the tshuvas say you can call up and tell them you're coming, there's no issue at all. What happened to me? I feel the cost of house. What happened to me? Then I came at a Shabbos a little bit late, and they couldn't even find the cheapest thing, the quickest thing to make, which is fish and its own oil and flour. They couldn't make it. Let's just finish the Mishnah. Mitzvah's little Ketzer. What's the mitzvah? Little Tana Kamer of Nachman. Soidin al Gagi Itztaba. They placed it on the roof of the Itztaba, of these seats there. They placed them on the roof. Amalei said to him, place him on the roof. So they put it Erev Shabbos on the roof, and tomorrow they're going to use these arabas. What he wants to dry them up, and Rashi says dry as possible. Some people want to learn from here that we see from here that a lulav, even if it dries a little bit, it's already, if it loses its color, for example, it's already possible, because you're saying he dried them up just being overnight. You put it Friday and Shabbos morning, how much time was there already in the sun? And yet Rashi says it's dry enough to be possible. So by a lulav maybe dry, when we say lulav hayavish, it means losing its color. It became very pale, and that's enough. Elaima, don't say the word gag. The roof of the benches are like gavitz. I mean the top of the benches. And we have the same word in Pesachim there when it talks about the 2 challahs they used to put at a Pesach, 2 challahs they put off there, so people should know when they should stop eating this chulin, when they should stop eating truma. And over there was the exact same mistake, but the other way around. There, he first said al gavitz on the benches, and they asked him, the benches, who's going to see it? She said, I meant gag. And here he said gag, and he meant gav. So either somebody repeated incorrectly or he didn't specify, and when it was set over, the taster tries to explain how this mistake came about. Anyway, I want you to know the way the Had Habayis was set up was Stav Kafaloya. There were 2 rows of benches, Stav Lifnim Stav. There was 1 row within the other. Don't think there was one on top of the other. There's 1 row in front of the other because Rechava liked always to be pedantic and make sure he got everything right, everything straight. So he told them that it was Stav Lifnim Mistav. Okay, we'll stop here. We'll see you tomorrow night, 7:15 in Mitzvah Hashem tomorrow night.